budget items tonight. We'll start with Amy, let her get the ball rolling here.
Oops. Before we dive into the first budget, I do want to make a few comments. Some of you, many of you may have come into a job after someone else has done it, and it certainly takes some extra time for exploration and really trying to decipher and dig back and understand why certain things were done in a certain way. So myself, Ryan, very much so, and our department heads have spent a lot of time doing that. Conversations back and forth, reading old minutes. So I am confident that next year going in, we will be a little bit ahead of where we are right now. A couple things that I have noticed maybe in the budget and in just certain things that I've seen is it appears that at times, yes has been said when it should have been no, and no has been said when it should have been yes. And we will, if we have something before you, we're gonna do our very best to explain what that is. We've got some notes we're using internally. We have put a lot of time into using our system to add budget notes so we understand what is in each line item, that the department heads understand that if there's a change made, what that is. What we've asked our department heads to do is really evaluate their budgets. In years past, our department heads have not been very involved in the budget process. I think they should be very involved. It's their budget to help us understand and identify needs. We expect them to go out and do the things. We want them to be a part of how that's developed. There are some areas in the budget that, in my opinion, maybe have not been adjusted appropriately over the years, where there's certain line items that budget has exceeded year over year over year. We have tried to make some of those adjustments. What I would ask of you, and we are seated as Ways and Means Committee now, is that we would like to go through each individual budget with you, answer questions for you. We are working now with the county to get our preliminary net tax capacity so that we can get through the budgets and come to you and say the budgets as you see them now is at this levy. And we have a spreadsheet that's going to help identify what that can look like for various households, residents, businesses in our community at varying values that we think will be helpful. If there is a time, and I hope we can look at it a little bit more comprehensively, and as a large budget, if there's a reduction that needs to be made, I would like you to let us know at what level that is and let me go back with department heads and identify. I don't want to determine if a mower is a higher priority than a pickup truck if the pickup truck isn't starting. So I want to really get to work with and involve the department heads so then we can come back with you with your requested reduction. So my hope is that we can explain to you what we have before you. There are certainly things that we can discuss if we need reductions about deferring and reducing. When we do that, we want to come back with you and let you know what we've chosen and what the impact or implications of that reduction is. I don't feel that anyone has put anything frivolous or a complete want or anything that's completely unreasonable in here, but we want to make sure that we're answering those questions for you, and then if we need to go back and make something, defer them to a future year, we will certainly do that, but I'd like to work with staff then to be able to bring back that reduced proposal to you. So, what we have first, the first 5 should go through pretty quickly. The information technology budget, Chad will carry most of that. He has some things to explain to us about our current setup, but in the council budget, you'll see at the bottom, the very last number on the right shows you a percentage variance, and each line shows you if there was a change. It'll show you a budget variance if there was a change up or down. We did add back in some travel expense and league meeting expenses. The last couple of years, due to COVID, there really has not been much travel. The league hasn't even been holding a lot of in-person meetings over the last few years, but we do see that starting back up again and want to make that available in our budget if things come up that you are interested in or wish to attend. There's a loan forgiveness line. There was 5 years where there was a $70,000 per year loan forgiveness. It was per an agreement. I am not certain entirely what that was. It ended in 2019, I believe. I plugged in 10,000 there just as a contingency for you to consider. If you would not like that in there, we can certainly drop it, but I didn't know if that's something that you would want to consider. I can get you more information on the past, but it was per an agreement and happened each year for 5 years. And so if you don't think that's necessary, we can certainly take that out, or if we need to come back as a reduction later, that's a line we can certainly look at. You will see a little bit of adjustments there on liability insurance, workers' compensation. We asked HR to just review that with us and make sure we were appropriate. Subscriptions and dues. Let me find my notes here. We moved, so there were some dues that were hitting a different line item, so we made a little bit of adjustments, but the dues line there covers your CGMC annual assessment. They are who lobby for us for our LGA dollars. They have an association that we can join as well. And then our League of Minnesota Cities annual dues are included in that as well. Okay.
Amy, can I ask how much that is?
Sure. The CGMC annual dues were $13,400. League of Minnesota Cities was just over $8,000.
Okay.
And then we have.
Like these type of things now, are these considered in the subscriptions or?
I'm not sure. I took a picture of what Christie
I asked
had. I'll have to
already.
check on that. There should be some that are included in our subscription, but I'll pull invoices and see what these particular publications are coming from. Let me get down here. The council approved budget items. I want to go over, there's a couple things that are always in there. And then we did have a couple of requests that it was from DCDP, and I'll talk through that a little bit. So Tri-Valley has an annual stipend that's paid out of there. I believe they were at, whoops, let me find here. They were at $13,500 previously. They did request a $14,500 annual stipend. DCDP had submitted a request that was higher than what I have before you. Their request in this line item is $14,500. There were some things such as sponsoring of certain events. I talked to DCDP and explained that I'm a bit uncomfortable sponsoring certain events because where do you say yes and where do you say no? And I don't think our budget can support sponsoring every event, and they understood that. The things that we have in here are, let's see. They are proposing some more benches for downtown at $8,000. I proposed back matching up to $4,000 and doing half of those. Our city staff does help install and do certain cement work if they needed that. They are looking at designing and purchasing some waste receptacles for downtown at $5,000. They are looking at a purchase of some cement game tables to be located on Ash Street between Robert and Loring on the dike side, and also in the courtyard by Montague's, to include a ping pong table, cement bag toss, a cement board for checkers and chess. They had proposed that at $9,100. Again, I came back and asked if they would consider a 50-50 match on that, so the city up to $4,550.
Temporary on the levees? On the dikes?
No, there's some cement pads over there. It's just on the dike side.
Oh, on the dry side.
Yeah, and there's some cement pads already there. They're trying to look at some spaces to utilize and enhance.
Okay.
And then they do some walking trail signage, a ghost sign walk, which is the older signs in the downtown, trying to enhance that just for pedestrian traffic for $1,000. So that's what we included in their $14,550. I think the initial request was at $40,000. So I've spoken to Shirley. She was agreeable to that, and
So as we go through the budget process here, I mean, there's obviously things that we need, some
Yeah.
things that are, there's levels, I think, of, so when we get to the end, and if we start to say, you know what, we need to take a look at maybe budgets again. Could some of these line items be like A, B, or C, or 1, 2, or 3 type of level? Does that make sense, or?
Yes, and I would say if we had to come down to making a decision about something that impacts our ability to provide city services versus supporting another organization, we would really and should always lean towards what we need to provide city services. That really is our purpose. So yes, I agree with that. Even the loan contingency, that is something that we can give up if we need to, that is not going to take away from our ability to provide the city services that our citizens expect. Yeah. Okay, what's up to zero? The transfer to other funds was set at 6,000, and I did not make very good notes on that. Let me look here. I rounded that to 10. It looks like in the past we have used that. 2020, I think it looks like maybe the ICOF Boulevard transfer. So just a line item to hit if the general fund, if the council approves something and the general fund was going to pay for it, we can run it through that line. I left that at 10 in case something came up that you wished to pay for. It was set at 6 before. So that is also some wiggle room there if we needed to make any adjustments.
Amy, can we find out some more information about that loan forgiveness expense? What exactly that is?
From the prior
10,000.
5-year? The 10,000 is not tied to anything right now. Are you talking about the prior?
Yeah.
Yes.
So nothing's been put in that category since 2019?
I believe 2019 was the last, 2020, it looks like was the last. There was a 5-year, $70,000 loan forgiveness. It was tied to an agreement. Last payment was in 2020. So 2021 did not have anything budgeted for that, and we can certainly remove that, but I'll see if I can find out. I think Kathy can help us pull that.
Who the agreement was with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me write.
You know, I think that
with that loan forgiveness, we did have, or currently do still have a loan out there with a chiropractor that was here in town that has passed away. And I think, you know, it was something that Amy and I thought we need to start thinking about some loan forgiveness in there when those situations like that happen. And then we would come to you as the council and say, okay, well, you know, we have this loan with the city and he owes this much is what was forgivable. This is the amount of payments that are left on the loan. So that's why we added that line item.
Okay.
Is your plan to have that as an annual thing, so just build that to have a
I
number
think it'd be a
there?
wise decision to do something like that, especially with the amount of IRP loans, you know, that we're going to try and promote for the city to give out and help the different businesses here in town.
So it very well could be that we just don't spend it, but at least we have it.
Right, it's there for you if something should come up, yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for helping me remember that conversation we had. We've had a lot of them. Are there any questions on the council budget?
I just have a question, Amy. I know last year when we were doing this, we had talked about it, and now it's probably gonna be changed differently with all the department heads doing their own, but, you know, there was always ones where we never knew what the actual number was at the end of the year, you know, where they
The
were,
total-
on a line item, let's just say. And that was one of the, that I requested, to say, you know what, if they had $10,000 off a $20,000 budget on line item, why do we have it there, you know, and it's, and each department head was different with an answer on that, but generally it was like, well, it's always been that way, where.
Right.
I think we really, I'm
So-
guessing this will take care of it,
I think it will, but I think that should be, and Ryan mentioned we're waiting on the audit. We are waiting way too long on our final audit numbers. One, we need to start our audit sooner on our end. Yes, I think you're asking for at the end of the year, you'd like to see year-to-date actuals compared to budget on the line item. Yes, I think we have some reports available to us that once we get those year-end entries done, that we can provide for you. I will,
generate that.
yeah, I will tell you that 2021 and 2020 don't look how I would want them to look if I were managing the budget. There are some line items, as I mentioned, that looks like they just simply have not been adjusted year over year. But that's what we are looking at as we go through and trying to identify that, or if things need to shift. I think once we get our year-end entries in, we can generate a report for you to see then where each budget landed. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm gonna go swiftly so that you're not here all night, but if you need me to stop or slow down at any time, just let me know. The next one you have in front of you is the mayor's budget. And Mayor Stainbrook, you do have travel expense built in. Yours doesn't show any changes on there, but we are happy to add or don't really want to take away from you, so that one was a pretty smooth one to go through. And as we've prepared budgets, we have looked at 2019 and 2020 year-to-date actuals and where we are today and really tried to give you good, realistic numbers before you based on actuals or projected activity. The next budget you have is administrative office. So salary-wise, that has your city administrator and the city administrator's executive assistant. So myself and Tina are covered in this budget. I did want to mention to you, in anticipation of tonight and your vote after your special meeting, we did include the changes in these budgets so you could see them for the increased allocation of the employer contribution, knowing that if that did not pass, we could bring that back down. So you'll see that reflected in here. Salaries we have based on each one looked at, we've got my contract, of course, we have non-bargaining unit agreements, and that's what we've really tried to look at, what those are. It builds in the increases for us on those agreements. Professional fees is line 0312. That was set at 11,000. I requested that up to 15. That's where certain engineering fees would hit that aren't particularly allocated to another budget. Examples I'm trying to give, summer campground, that design was, the design work on that wasn't budgeted anywhere, but there is room in this budget for that. So that's where some of those typically hit. Going forward, as we have time and start earlier on the budget, I'm not sure that makes as much sense to me, but at this point, there's not another place to poke it, so I want to have room for those. If you would look at 0341, the employment advertisement, we were budgeted at 1,800, we're set at 3,000. This year, we've used more than we like to because we have had to advertise for so many openings. Something I considered after I prepared this was we do need to go out and advertise probably early in the year, if not late this year, for our chief of police, who will be with us through the first quarter of 2022, and then we'll be taking retirement. I would like to think about that a little bit and see, is 3,000 enough to cover our normal advertisement for employment? Do we need to look at where we're gonna advertise and get some costs? So I may have to come back to you on that particular line. I wanna make sure we're prepared to do that. And then 500 was added in for office equipment and furnishings. There was nothing in there. Sometimes things come up. We have really old office chairs, and we have to sit in those all day. Mine in particular is not, but if Tina's chair broke or needed something, we'd like to have a little bit of budget room in there to take care of those things. Any questions on the admin budget? Okay. What do we got next? Elections budget. Okay, and Ashley may need to jump in here for me, but the elections budget, of course, will be up and down with our cycle of city elections. So if you will look for me on the election judge pay, you will see that we did not have anything budgeted under the current budget section, not being an election year, but we will have some expenses in 2022. So we have put that back in. Again, looking at actuals and our prior expenses on that is where that number was developed. The professional services just beneath that, we are paying a 10-year equipment for election equipment. 2022 will be year 4 of 10. We paid, I think, about $9,200 this year, so we just put a little cushion in there at $10,000 to cover those expenses. They are paid to Polk County Taxpayer Service Center. And then we did adjust your liability and workers' compensation and hall rental. Those are expenses we have actually had in the budget and needed to reflect them here for you going forward in that election year. Ashley, would you add anything that I did not have in there? Okay. Any questions on election budget?
You were around 15 grand last year, or 2 years ago.
On the election pay? Let me look, I think I've got that one in front of me. In 2020, it was about 12,000.
Okay.
So I wanted to leave enough room. I don't know, go ahead.
Just due to the fact that we had a presidential primary in 2020, and so that's when the budget was a little bit higher than normal, because we had 3 elections. Normally, that is not the case,
So
so
do you think that 15 could come down?
it could be
Okay.
just because that was a presidential primary.
Okay,
So-
we can look at that amount together then. I was gonna get over and ask Ashley that question, but
Thank you, Ashley.
I never made it that far. Okay, next budget is building official, so Greg is here with us. I will cover a few things, and then Greg, if you want to be ready for questions or jump in if you think I missed something. This budget is showing a very small change of 3.62%, but as you'll see, we adjusted salaries based on the pay schedule and the non-bargaining agreement. Made some adjustments then to FICA. You'll see the health insurance adjustment, that's based on your decision this evening on the contribution. Office supplies were at $100. That is a bit of a tight budget for certain items, and so we requested a slight bump for him there.
You just mentioned chairs. I just busted my chair this last
Oh,
week, so just so
good,
you know.
okay, well, gosh, already spending it, and I haven't even got it approved yet. Jeez, Greg, come on. Just kidding with you, we'll get you taken care of. The professional fees, 0312, let me find my notes here. That is right now being budgeted for in-depth inspections on Brad Bale. He is doing some of our more complex commercial inspections while Greg is working towards that certification. So there will be a point that we will not need that anymore, and it may even be true that we will not need to expend that into 2022, but want to make sure we have that so we can complete our inspections. Ag Innovation Campus, Forney Building, New Flyer, Epitome Energy as it gets going, those will be specific examples where those commercial inspections are really important, and it helps them continue to move forward swiftly in their project.
And I'd just like to point out, most of those fees go to plan review, not typically inspections. I can do that, and with Brad's guidance as well, what he's specifically looking for.
Okay.
So.
We've made a slight bump in legal publication notices. Greg's budget would handle things if there's a public hearing for planning commission, variances, those types of things. Actually, many of the items that go before planning commission do call for a public hearing. Those are published in our local newspaper, so wanted to make sure we had adequate budget for that. And then our subscriptions and dues. I'm trying to decipher my own notes here.
That's basically that, I don't think it's sufficient budget for the codes and commentaries, for example, for the code books.
Okay.
A lot of the code books itself are very precise, but there's a lot of conditions, and I need additional material to reference to see what conditions occur and when they occur and why. So, I mean, it's basically some ideas how to enforce the code in a better and practical manner, basically. So I need more material to do that.
So there was a program that you and I were talking about one time about some type of program you were needed, or you thought it would be nice, was this?
Oh, yes, that was actually Chad's gonna get into that. We were talking about a GIS program that I would do the permitting and show it on a map, basically. And I do not currently have that. I don't wanna get into it too much, but it didn't happen. I'll just speak to it.
It was supposed to happen and it just didn't yet, so we are gonna try to get that rolling for next year.
Amy, is he getting any training time or class time to help him further into his chance to get
Yes.
his license?
I do have training that's in here. I think it's currently at 4,000. That was not changed. I will be doing some online training. I've got one set up for October. Basically, I typically try to do as much training in the January as I can. That's kind of the more downtime for construction, so.
I just wanna make sure that he's getting what he needs to.
Yes, and
fulfill
I've actually
requirements.
talked to Greg, and he knows that if he needs to go to a training, one of the challenges he had was with COVID, they didn't have some of the online training and class time. But he's done some online, and we do support that really for any of our staff members. And I've talked to Greg about that. If he needs to travel to do that or have some quiet time to get those trainings, and we do support that and try to facilitate that so he can keep moving forward.
This spring I did do a week or 4 days of training online, so just earlier, so. But typically that would have been travel, hotel, everything else, so this year was totally different.
Thank you.
I would like to mention a couple other things. I had discussed possibly a printer and plotter for example, our zoning maps that are just behind the lane over there. We do not have the capability, but I'll leave that to Chad. That's somewhat incorporated the same way within his budget. And also, that GIS mapping for our permits, that would also be a subscription service that he would have under his budget, just so you're aware of that.
Were there any questions on building official? We tried to give you some easy ones to zip through, and then Chad will have some things he's gonna explain to us and educate us on and talk us through. Thank you, Greg. We have made several shifts in the IT budget, things that may have been spread among other budgets at some point. It's easier for Chad to manage when we can consolidate those and watch for trends. And before I turn it over to Chad, give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. When Chad was hired, I can't remember, I know Jake was on the hiring team, Steve, I think you were. The budget that was set for the IT director was very low. As a matter of fact, it was within hundreds of dollars of what our water superintendent was making. We discussed at that point that we needed to adjust that. We don't want to lose Chad as our IT person over some money, and that particular position was out of alignment with the rest of our directors. What you will see in your budget today are two things in the salary line. One, I would like to adjust Chad's salary to $82,000, which is in line with our director's salaries. The second is, and Chad will be able to talk about this a little bit more, is adding an IT technician to the department. We've put in $45,000 for that. Chad spends, I don't honestly know how he is able to serve everyone internally, except I can tell you this. He is working too many hours. He is here at night. He is having police cars roll up to him in the middle of the night to be fixed. A technician can take some of those things, running over to the police department and getting a squad car back up while he's focusing on our networks and our servers and keeping us online. There's some things that he is doing IT technician work that is taking him away from director work. He is here entirely too much, and even a bump in salary is not fair compensation for that. The challenge of not having that is he's going to have to continue working the hours he's working. He's going to get burnt out, and I really, really don't want to lose him.
What was the technician's salary again?
45 is what we have it budgeted in for. Chad is familiar with working with that level of staff at his former employment and has a good idea of what that job description can look like, and he did check around for kind of our area and what seemed appropriate for that level.
With that being said, I know there's always a concern with the police department about people working with the police department on account of some of the things that they deal with, and so people don't get it out, you know.
Certainly.
So do they have to be certified in some sort for that kind of stuff?
So that's a great question. So they do have to pass a background check, because of, the
Right.
proximity of working with that sensitive information. But there is, a certification, an annual certification, some training associated with it that, all IT staff that are around public safety data need to complete to be able to work that, myself included.
I think we would likely be more hesitant if we had like an intern that may be changing positions quickly or filling that with different people to do that. And it would certainly be at the director's discretion how he would direct that. We have discussed there's some room down here in our basement that could serve as more of a workroom, working on laptops. I mean, he's in 3 places at once, and I'm not kidding. When he's at the police department, someone is calling him. I know that he's been coming back to City Hall about once a week in the middle of the night to get our network back up, to support our police station. That's not just time, that's also part of our network issues that we'll get into, but he's doing more than a one-person job.
So what percent, I mean, if you had to put a percentage of where your tasks are in different parts of the city, could you break that down?
I would say at this point in time, since January, most of the work that I've been doing, over 70% of it, is technician-type work, repair, break fix. That's across all departments.
For any more so in any particular department, or?
To be completely honest with you, Councilmember Klatt, that's been across the board in all departments at this point.
I'm just, the reason why I'm asking that question, I mean, I just wonder, at some time, does it make sense to have a IT person designated for a specific department? Say if the police department is the biggest place where he's spending most of his time, maybe it's worth talking about having that be a part of the police department's budget and having, say, a technician under that.
We actually did have that discussion, and I try to rely on department heads. That would be probably helpful in some ways for police department, but would not help cover those other departments that he's hitting.
But that's why I was asking how
Yeah.
much, if he's spending 90% at the police department or something like that, if that might be.
And in future budget years, and this has been a discussion, but with the work we had to do on this particular budget to get it before you, I didn't have time, but there are options also to spread that technician's salary. If there is another department besides the general fund, we can spread that. And really, we would just rely on the department head to help us understand where that's appropriate. If they're spending time out at the wastewater lift station and the SCADA and those things, we can spread that around. We just didn't have time this year to get all of those changes made for you, but that is certainly a possibility and something that we've discussed.
That'd be his own central garage.
Right, yeah.
One of the tools in the past that I've used to successfully derive those types of metrics to determine what those allocations would be across departments is a help desk ticketing system. That's something that I have not had time in an administrative capacity to set up to get established. But effectively, that centralizes the call for help, if you will, from all of the departments, and it actually will break it down by percentage on a month-to-month or whatever frequency you need to help you determine where the demand is if you want to do straight allocation.
Yeah,
Because IT, I mean, this is going to continue to grow. I mean,
It is.
everything, as we get more advanced in our day-to-day lives, I mean, your job just gets bigger and bigger. So, I mean, if we haven't adjusted this budget over a period of time, then I think we need to
Right.
start.
This
so.
budget was stunning to me, and not really in a good kind of way. So I'm
We had
the,
folks in the IT though that did not want another nickel in there for any.
That is true.
Improvement.
And we are
They were
now-
asked, they were begged to
we are
come
now
up
suffering.
in advance.
Yeah.
Wanted to
Yeah.
strangle them to get some more.
Yeah, and they wouldn't do it. so
There
I
was,
mean,
I think, a culture of pride, if you will, in keeping your budgets flat, but that's not okay if you're not addressing needs either. And I think our organization has suffered, and this budget looks really big and hefty right now. Some of those are shifts from other budgets, but some of them really are needs. And Chad has done a good job helping me understand, and I know that he will do that for you. And unless there was anything you were expecting me to cover, I think I will turn that over to you now.
I have one question. Are we behind on IT equipment?
Short answer,
YES.
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 And as,
That's from years past of,
Yeah.
because they're not adding things, and that, would that be something that we could plan on the future of maybe a little bit more money to that department to
He
help
has got
try and
that.
catch up?
Yes, I think Chad has done a good
there's a
job
5-year
with.
plan that he's
Yeah,
got here. that-
there are things that Chad has in this budget that really can't wait, but there are things that he's done a really good job about being realistic about implementation time. It might be something we really need, but if we know we can't get to it next year, you're not gonna see it in that next year's budget. But I think I think he will cover probably most of those questions. If you wanna start, and then if anyone has a question, just hop in.
And that's a great jumping in point to your question, Clayton. So, yes, we are behind in technology. The specific area that I want to first talk about is what we call the end user workstation, or the computers at the desks within the departments for all employees. So if we were to look at a capital equipment replacement cost to just update everyone to where they should be in a single year, that would be a big number. So basically what I have done is I have taken a look at the count of those workstations, and there's about 42 of them. And I have looked to spread out the equipment replacement cost across what I estimate to be a reasonable amount of time that we can continue using the existing equipment that's there now, that's in place. And that is a 3-year capital equipment replacement plan. So what effectively I've looked at is those 42 workstations and doing a third of them each year across the next 3 years. In addition to those end user workstations, there's also some specialized IT equipment in our public safety departments, the police department in particular. They are looking at what's called a hardened or mobile data workstation that's in their squad cars. They've been using a particular technology from a company called DTAC, or GTAC, and it's a very good platform. And next year and the subsequent 3 years have one replacement GTAC for the squad cars as well. That's built into that budget. And then finally, for public safety, there's the in-squad camera system. So this is the system that is rolling whenever they do a stop, when they do an arrest. This is protection for the officer, and it's also evidence that can be used in court. And so the system that we presently have is very much showing its age. The system that we are considering a quote on is a company called Axon. It is the company that I worked with in Chaska very successfully in the last couple of years, not only for in-squad camera systems, but there we had body cams as well. And so eventually we could look at going further down that road for that technology. It's a very good proposal. It's called their Fleet 3 system, and it's up to date. It also includes in my capital equipment budget, one of the big upgrades, if you will, is to interconnectivity, or how our buildings are connected to each other. That's one of the single points of failure that I've been dealing with again and again since the beginning of January, is losing connections from our buildings and having them drop off and having to go out there and reset them and get them up and running. Another big thing that plays into that particular problem is the age of the equipment and the fact that some of that equipment has been discontinued and is literally no longer available on the market for replacement. That's a bad situation to be in. If we have a permanent failure of a piece of equipment, we'd be looking at big upfront costs to rip and replace. So what I've looked at is there was the beginnings of conversation with our incumbent internet service provider, Mid-Continent Communications, and they brought a proposal forward, which is up from what we typically spend each year, about $21,000 on, and that's our current budget, for cable modems. And that is how we get internet at the different facilities, and then over the top of those cable modems, the buildings talk to each other.
Chad,
Yes.
am I correct in remembering that the cable modems you speak of might be like the ones sitting next to our home computers?
They are the exact same.
Okay, so
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we're understanding in
So these
this
are-
room that we have some residential off-the-shelf equipment,
Yes.
trying to keep our,
They're commercial.
yes, so I just wanted to make sure that that was said.
Okay.
So, the one proposal in hand was from Mid-Continent, some slight upgrades to the equipment, but effectively, we would still be connecting our facilities together over that cable modem equipment. The other proposal that I sought out and have in hand is from Holsted Telephone Company, and they have been busy over the last few years driving fiber optic cabling into the city. And they are in a position now where they have fiber optic to the buildings of many of our city facilities. And by the end of September, if we go forward with their proposal, next year, they would have it in all of our city facilities. And so when you actually do a dollar-to-dollar comparison from the incumbent provider to HTC, we're within $300 per year. So my recommendation is we look to move to fiber optic backbone as a technology and make that move forward for the city.
Do they, I don't know how that works as far as Midco's a franchise cost or fee one. Can Halsted come in here not being a franchise?
So my understanding of that is that Mid-Continent Communications is a franchise provider for residential internet service within the city of Crookston. Halsted Telephone Company would offer a business internet solution that would not compete within the residential market.
Thank you.
Your Honor, is there any way that any of this money from this COVID could be worked into something, updating a technology type thing for better reporting on things in the city for, yeah.
I'm going to say, we have explored that, and I will let Chad jump in as well. There are some dollars in there that's specific for broadband. Chad will have to back me up on this, but right now, there's a couple of options. One is that the city can be a broadband service provider. We do not have the staff or resources to support a project of that magnitude. And Chad, would you explain to me, or to them, how you did to me about if it were the
Absolutely,
providers?
Happy to. So one of the requirements of the American Rescue dollars that would be available for broadband improvement is specific in that those improvements must directly benefit the end constituent within your community, AKA either the city would have to become an internet service provider and make those services available, which I'm not even sure we would be able to do given the franchise agreement we presently have in place with the continent. Or B, we would need to partner with a internet service provider in a position to provide that residential internet service and use those dollars to that effect. Those are the requirements as I understand for those dollars. I have operated an ISP, like we're talking about an option A in Chaska, and I did that with a staff of 5, and it literally took that amount of staff to be able to have the ISP responsibility and the city IT responsibilities.
I thought you said that some of that money could be used for infrastructure, and that's IT infrastructure.
Well, yeah, but the end user is the question, I think is what Chad was saying.
I'm just saying it's something, that option they could
Yeah.
look at and see if we could wiggle without getting us in trouble.
We have, and I've asked Chad probably more than, and Ryan, more than they have liked to answer my question about that, but we want to be really careful, because if you do spend those dollars in a way that's ineligible, you have to pay those back.
All right.
Right, no.
So, Ryan, do you have?
But, and we thought exactly what you thought when these plans came out, but they're very, very specific on how we would look at upgrading our equipment. How does that help someone in town now who does not have internet? How is that going to help those people currently in our community without internet service?
Amy, what's the length of the agreement with Mid-Continent?
The franchise agreement, I would
Yeah.
have to pull that. Chad may know more about it than I do at this
I
point,
didn't
but
come prepared
Sure.
specifics with you tonight, but I'm happy to answer those questions and let you know what the current terms of that agreement are.
Okay, because Halstead's pulling in fiber optic cable, so I'm assuming at some point they'll be able to do residential, and that would possibly,
that would probably be a decision of the council then as that franchise agreement term comes up.
I think it was 5-10 years,
I can't remember how long it was for.
It was a lengthy time, I remember that.
Well, because
And
it's a
that's
huge
generally what
investment.
they would want, a longer time period, but we can pull that for you and send it to you. I will say, just as a side note on the American Relief dollars, there will be some this year that we will be able to recapture for lost revenues due to COVID at like our arena, and we are calculating those things now. So while you may not see it in this particular budget, this year we will be able to do some things. The pool, some of our lost revenue. Yeah, yes, like Club Kid, those types of things. We will be able to recapture some of that lost revenue, but we'll likely see that in the 2021 budget year.
so
Sorry
kind
for
of like
that side note.
on a side note to this, you know, we're looking, I was talking to the Minnesota Deed recently, and they were talking about this GigaZone being a really big thing for recruiting and attracting remote workers. Is that something that would be something the city would have to manage if they were to have a GigaZone? I know that like Bemidji is recently,
Under the first option of having to become an ISP and then make broadband services available directly to the residential or small business market, yes, we would have to completely manage that. If I recall correctly, one of the minimum requirements for the zone that you're talking about is 100 megabits per second symmetrical, or effectively 100 megabits up and 100 megabits down. I'm not sure that any provider within, operating internet services provider within Crookston, meets that requirement right now, specifically the upload capacity.
sure,
But that's something I'm happy to have conversations with both of them about.
okay.
Can everyone hear okay? Okay.
Find time to ask now.
And I'm almost finished here, I promise. And so the next three areas that we're looking at improvement are effectively a shift from capital equipment costs to operational costs. One of the big cost savings maneuvers is moving away from the replacement of printers that we have within the city, which can go between $1,000 to $1,500 a piece, to a managed print services agreement that we have with one of our managed service partners. So, we're able to bring down a cost of replacement at that level of about 15 printers down to about $2,000 annually for up-to-date printers across the city throughout the term of that agreement. And that was a 3-year agreement. There's options for longer agreement, but I want to kind of get into the waters with the agreement in the shorter term to see how things work.
So they would maintain those, and if there's any issues, they would be the ones that would manage those?
Correct.
Would that also take that off your plate too?
Yes, it would, yes. And that includes the large format plotter that Greg mentioned during his presentation.
It might be okay for plotters and stuff that is not real time sensitive, but working upstairs and wanting something right away, I know how that is when you call them to come and service it. It's not, you're not their only customer, let's put it that way.
No, agreed, and there are SLAs within this managed service agreement that holds them to a specific response and remediation time. But you're absolutely right. The next area is an update, a much-needed update to our city website. So in its present form, the website has issues with it and what we call the framework behind it. What I have looked at as far as a proposal is a redesign and a hosted option through a provider that I worked with in Chaska. It's also a provider for many municipalities, including East Grand Forks, called Civic Plus. And so that is built into the 2022 budget. If we move forward with that, I will be putting together a task force, if you will, of individuals from all departments across the city to bring content from their departments forward and look at what makes the most amount of sense for a redesign at this time of our website. So the major upfront cost for that is in 2022. There is a much lower hosted cost each year past 22 for upkeep and maintenance and hosting of that site.
Did you say it was Civic Plus?
Correct, Civic Plus. Next is a shift from what we presently have for our office productivity software. That's the Google G Suite platform. And what we are looking at is a migration or a move to Microsoft Office 365, which is the hosted office productivity service offering. We use it in Chaska. It's in my opinion, a terrific platform.
Thank you.
There's approximately a $30,000 migration cost that's associated with it, but in actuality, each year past that, it's less expensive than what we're presently paying annually for the Gmail solution.
Chad, can I jump in on that?
Yes.
I also came from a city that used Office 365. The G Suites, the Gmail that we're using, does not offer some of the professional features that most of us are used to. I don't know how to make a folder. I can make a label. That really hasn't helped me any. My inbox is out of control. If I could organize and flag things, and I don't think I can set something as important, and that may seem trivial, but really, with the amount of communication that we do internally, externally, being able to save your documents to the OneDrive, isn't that what it's called?
Correct.
OneDrive, okay. And still have it, not switch to a G sheet or whatever that thing is, I don't know. It really would be nice and a bit more professional in how we are communicating, because that is one of our primary ways of communicating and saving information. And when I work from home, sometimes it's nice to be able to pull that up from the cloud and not have to drag my Surface Pro. It would just bring us up a little bit, and I think I still haven't quite figured out G Suites yet, and I've been here almost a year, but.
Tons of options. I mean,
Yes.
Microsoft Teams for stuff like
Yes.
that. I mean, it just,
So sorry I took that side path there, but
how soon can that be? I mean,
January 1, just kidding.
I have the migration plan in hand from our
dreamer.
partner, Marco. So literally on project approval, we can move forward.
for those of you that haven't used that, it's way better than what we got here.
Okay.
And then the final talking point, in addition to, I should say, there's some network cabling that I'd like to clean up in facilities across the city. We're a public-facing organization, and we've got instances where there's cabling that's literally hanging like a spider from the ceiling in offices. And it's functional, yes, but it really needs to be addressed. There's some dollars in my budget to address that. I do not have the certification that is required by the National Electric Code to get up into plenum space or effectively up into the ceiling and work to pull cabling where it's needed. There's professional service organizations that will do that, and that's built into my 2022 budget as well. It's not a large amount, but I think it'll go a long way to remediate some of those situations. And then probably the largest ticket item in 22 is the Executime timekeeping platform. Now, that deserves a little bit of explanation. So our current ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning software vendor, is a company called Tyler Technologies. They're based out of Texas. That's our financial software. That's the package that we use to put our budgets together, to run all of our budget reports, all of our financial reports. All of that is a program called Encode. That is a software solution that we run in-house. By that I mean that it must live in Crookston on our server platform, which is also very much showing its age, but I'm not looking to address that in 22. That'll be a future budget request to improve that. The reason I give this explanation is I'm looking to make a shift where possible away from these in-house type of solutions. Having to spend dollars every year to keep server infrastructure at a point where we can keep running these solutions does not, in my opinion, make a lot of sense. You move this to a hosted platform, you move these types of solutions to a partner that you have an SLA or service level agreement with to stay operational to the frequency that you need it. And yes, there's some upfront costs in migrating away to that platform, but in the long run, it is the better move to do. This Executime timekeeping solution is one of those hosted platforms. I keep saying this, but it is the same one that we used in Chaska. It is the time card software. It is the HR portal. It is how you clock in and clock out of your job on a day-to-day basis. It's how you do your time cards. I was very surprised when I came back after 14 years to find that we're still, the city of Crookston, on paper timesheets. That's something that had been in my rearview mirror for that period of time. Executime is a good solution. It was very well received and adopted across the board in all departments in Chaska. There is a big onboarding cost of the $84,000 that's built into this. We have had discussions actually with Chaska. That number I derived from a council action request in 2017 that Chaska made when they brought it on board. And so that is presently in our 2022 budget to make that move.
So that dollar amount, is that based on like how large the city is, how large the number of users are?
Yes, so it is a service cost. There is licensing that is a part of that, and it is on a per user basis.
And then after implementing that, what would be the yearly cost?
So let me grab my numbers here.
While he's looking at that, I do want to add, we were on the same Tyler Encode version in Ottawa where I worked, and also used Executime timekeeping. And while he is searching for that, I just want, filling out a paper time card, a one-off doesn't seem bad. With our seasonal workers, the amount of time that we have people filling out time cards, and then our HR person is keying in every single one of those seasonal employees, plus our full-time hourly, is really very, very time-consuming, and there's so many solutions out there. Executime allows me as a user to request a sick leave day or a vacation day. Right now, those are paper as well. So it's just moving us forward a little bit, and you then can download and import and do some things that takes away the bulk of that data processing.
And I don't think I mentioned, Executime is from Tyler Technologies as well. So it is the same
Company.
It is the same vendor that we have had experience with for our ERP solution.
I'm assuming then this allows you guys also to pull reports to see where your labor hours are in what departments and what have you as well?
There's also ways to code for a FEMA event where you need to do certain tracking. You can actually set up a pay code that's FEMA and track certain things versus getting a piece of paper and trying to go back and recapture. So there's a lot of there's a lot of benefit to having that. And yes, you can pull various reports down. You can import things into our Tyler Encode payroll system and pull those down. Yeah.
And then I'm assuming you could also look at historical data from year to year then with all this to see like where labor costs have gone up and down and all that.
My understanding is yes.
Yeah.
And so to directly answer your question, from the 84,150 for 22, it then goes to 47,578 for subsequent year for licenses.
Would you say that again?
I'm sorry, 47,578.
You know, something like this seems to be more than, to put it on a budget. It seems to me like it should be on the, you know, the 5-year plan, or if it's a 1-year plan, we should look at it now and invest. I mean, that's Flintstone style if you're putting it on paper. I mean, you know. Well, I mean,
I was kind of
The amount
thinking
of time
that
just
same thing,
inputting
you know.
data.
If we're that far behind and nothing's ever been upgraded in the years, and when you talk about we got $2 million in our general budget, should this be something that we upgrade this and get it done with and?
right, because if you adjust your budget to that, your
Yeah.
budget's gonna be high the next year, and you don't need that
When we
big
are,
investment.
when we get, and we are actually starting this preliminary work now, when we are looking at levy, we can actually allocate a number from our reserves to that to help offset
Right.
that levy. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we can certainly look at that
We're
for
gonna
this.
have a levy, yay high.
Right, and yes, that's true, but we will have some options there to, as we have a spreadsheet where we'll calculate levy, and we can actually plug in a reserve amount for that to help offset some of these costs, and we know that some of these things are shocking, really.
Because what is a 1% increase, what does that bring us?
We just got our net
That was
tax
like 15.
capacity today. I'd have to calculate
Well,
that.
I mean, just roughly, is it like $15,000?
It used to be like 18.
Something
I
in that.
couldn't
you know,
answer
so-
that without
So if you're gonna
completely
go up
guessing.
this and you're gonna go up 30%.
I mean, what's gonna happen once we start to get more up-to-date and modern? There's gonna be some other things that's gonna be experienced where people's not sitting down, going through time cards, so that who's ever doing that is gonna be able to have more time, so that's gonna be unexperienced, or that's hard to tally that up to say, okay, now somebody doesn't have to do that.
Right,
They
and
can
it's
do-
not that there's not other things, our HR person, our personnel policies really need to be addressed, but there's very little time to get to those things when data entry for payroll. My son, did some work this summer, and his paper time card in the shuffle got misplaced, and he had to come in and sit down with supervisors and redo it. So there's just, I have to have Tina help me remember to fill my sheets out, and it's kind of wild.
To
but-
give you an example of how the system works and some of the efficiencies that are gained from it, when I used it, I could approve all of my employees' timesheets from my phone. It took 5 minutes to do that. Leave requests, we had PPL, but that sort of thing, you can all do from a mobile device. And if you don't have one, then what we did is we set up little tablet PCs in our arena, sports arena, where part-time workers could just come in and do their timesheet right there. And like I say, 5-minute process for them to complete. It's very
Well, I agree with what Wayne and Tom were saying. I mean, some of the stuff, I think we need to step on the gas and do whatever we need to do to.
I think it's gonna come down, I mean, we're in the first day of this, and it's, we got a huge budget increase there, but it's gonna be what we feel is gonna be a necessity. That is gonna be a necessity for me over pickup, or
Yeah.
new something on.
As long as the pickup's not
I
working.
I do want to, well, and that's what I was going to say. I do hope when we get down to asking for reductions, so that I would like for you to share your ideas with us, but I would like to be able to work with staff and then myself. Chad's going to think his things are a priority, and Scott might think his things are, but
That's gonna be hard for us to be able to decipher that, what is a need?
Right, and I think-
What is a want, you know, type of thing.
Right, and I think if we can sit down with staff, then we can internally say, okay, this is, as a group, I will have to make final decision on what I bring forth to you, but be able to kind of say, what could you live without, reduce, defer, what can we not, and then bring that back to you so you can see that reduction. And we will take care, and we are sensitive to the fact that this budget really is going to be shocking. I've tried to give you a little bit of forewarning as we're working here, but we will be sensitive to that, and I do think it will be important that as we get to setting that levy, that we are sensitive to the fact of what funds can we use that we have reserves in that helps offset that and gets us where we need to be, and we will work hard on that, and we will be showing that to you also as we get everything input.
I mean, I know when we set budgets before, you hated to go into the reserves just for the reason that you can't run your business off reserves. You gotta,
That is
you
true.
gotta increase. But when it's specially like this, for a project or whatever, it should have been on a 5-year deal and been done. And
Yeah.
like I said, we didn't put anything into IT for how many years? And we begged them to come up with a budget
Right.
increase and.
Yeah,
I think it also would be helpful for all of us as we're kind of going through this to write our notes as to where we might want to go back to and look at it, so we kind of have a better idea of what we talked about already, since this is going to be a multi-day situation. So just maybe circling what you think could be reduced, so
Yeah.
then it's not such a remind me what we talked about 3 days ago.
and as a reminder, as you're setting your levies, if you ask us for a 5% reduction, I hope that it doesn't come to the point where you will not trust our recommendation if we tell you that an IT need is or is not greater than a piece of equipment. I hope you will let us, that's on the ground and has to go out and then administer those budgets and use those resources. We hope we did not put anything in here that we think is frivolous. That doesn't mean there's things that we can't go back and determine that can either be shifted, reduced, spread, some various things. And Wayne, to your comment, I agree with you on a habit of relying on reserves is unhealthy. We do have some funds that have very, very healthy reserves, and you levy because your citizens expect that you're levying that to spend it. And so I do think there will be an appropriate use and a nice balance we can find with some of these budgets that will help meet our needs and offset a really large levy increase for you.
I feel, for my take of just being at the truth of taxation last year to this year, the fact that these are so specific and we understand exactly what the needs are and that it's being explained, and that we as the elected officials are able to articulate that to our constituents when they ask us why it's a certain amount for a levy is very different than just saying, or that's just
And
what
just
was in the
looking at
budget.
a number and
right.
trying to make a decision.
Right.
And remember also, this year, we are broadcasting on YouTube. So that, I hope, is helpful for constituents if they choose to hang on this long. Some people might be in bed by now, but they can watch again tomorrow. I hope that's helpful as well. We are trying to be transparent, and we've done this internally, these exercises of going through line by line and understanding what makes up that number and why, and reading minutes and doing those things, and we hope to be able to share that with you and the public as we move through these budgets.
It's kind of funny, every year when we do this or whatever, the press goes out and says, this is what the levy is. Well, it's not $21 per thousand for, your house or whatever. A lot of
Right.
people don't understand that, and you can
Right.
repeat that year after year after year. I've been on here 6 years, and they beat it to death, but people still like, geez, that's gonna cost me a lot of money, and no, it's not.
Right, and we have a spreadsheet actually that we've begun working with, and as we get closer to a fully developed budget, we can plug in a number that'll spread down and show you, if it's a 6% levy, how that impacts households valued at different amounts and some businesses, and I think that will be helpful as a tool for us as an exercise, but also for the public to see. And then we can retain that tool if people have questions and come in and visit, we can show that as well.
I love the idea, though, too, also of us having this recorded now. So if there's something that somebody has a question about IT, and you're like, go back to August 23rd.
Let's go watch what Chad said.
So, yeah.
One final talking point. I promise I won't drag
I was
it
gonna say, that's the fourth one.
That's borrow time. This 2022 IT budget does not represent major rip and replace of our server infrastructure, which is another sorely hurting area. There was not enough time between me onboarding in January and now to pull the necessary proposals that I would need to look at what replacement of those would look like. But to forecast for you, again, the model that I'm looking at to avoid a major capital equipment cost that has to reoccur realistically every seven years is looking to move where we can to the cloud, to a hosted solution, to working with a managed service partner who will make equipment, networking equipment, server equipment, where we have to have it in-house available to us in a 3 or 5 or 7 year agreement term. So it's not one big upfront cost every 7 years. It's spread out across a period of time. It's a budgeted amount.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
If you have any specific questions for IT, we'll hand that back off to Chad. But just, if I can just recap a little bit, we're not asking you for any decisions yet. We really just want to inform, educate, provide information. And then we are working, as I said, we just got our very preliminary net tax capacity amount from the county today. So we are going to begin working with that and playing with some different things as we get these budgets fully developed and present them to you. So at the end, what we hope to do is show you everything. We want to show you what your levy is set at from what you saw, how we think we can offset that, get some response back from you on if you'd like to see a reduction, so we have time to come back to you. We are still kind of scheduling what you're gonna see next, but we will probably try to hit, since we're starting at 6 o'clock on Monday, hit some of the bigger budgets like Parks and Recreation, Public Works. Public Works has several funds under it to get through, Parks and Rec the same way. Try to hit some of those on our earlier evenings and then slip some fast ones in too to get through.
So probably, maybe in the future, like when we're doing budgets, there might be boxes that could just change automatically by percentage. Is that what we're?
Yes,
You know,
on the,
it's-
yep, on the spreadsheets that we are working on now, that would be true. If we said, what would a 6% levy do to households? We can plug that in and show you right up there. Or send it to you or whatever to do that. We're trying to develop some of those tools where we can do it, do some more live and interactive discussions so that we get to a group decision on where we want to be and then kind of go back and do some of that work for you.
For labor negotiations, who all's coming up on that now? Is it just
Only the law enforcement, this year, and then we will have the single issue reopeners for, the health insurance.
Right.
Yeah, so we're getting prepared for that. We've been in contact with, the LELS, representative. Got a meeting scheduled in September to get some preliminary discussions going and plan to get ahead of that before the end of the year.
This has been very informational, very
Good.
good, excellent,
That was our goal.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate the work that you've done and Ryan that you've done, because I'm sure this hasn't been any easy feat, having kind of restructured it so it's a lot more understandable. So I appreciate
You
the
should,
hard work and.
next time you see Tina, you should thank Tina. She sometimes reads my mind as I'm going by, and she really, if anyone gets on my calendar, it's because Tina really has kind of taken on some of, when I'm focused on this, she is managing and putting up with my frantic darting about. And so really our staff has all worked really, really hard. The finance department especially, I've got Ashley, I jump out and ask for a resolution, and Kathy's running reports, and Ryan's got, Monica's doing payroll stuff. So everyone has put a lot of time in this year. But we're also really building this so next year when we get to, we've got our notes. We know what's in these line items, and we're gonna be old pros by next year and know exactly where we're going and hope we have good. Yeah, we will be. Come on, by the time we get done.
Recorded now, you remember this.
That's our goal, anyway.
Okay, there.
But thank you, guys. I know this was a long night and lots of decisions and good things happened today, and we'll be back to talk more budgets next Monday. I know, well, Dale also keeps me in line sometimes, and
You wanted to do, public works at Park Board tonight, I'm going, no.
Mark?
We
he
wouldn't be till midnight.
redirected, he managed and redirected, so, and it worked out just much better.
First one, so we just get.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I wonder
Thank
if-
you,
yeah.
everybody.
That was very informational.
Drive safely home.